Hey everybody, I'm Chris Beytes, editor of GrowerTalks, Green Profit and Acres Online, the newsletter. And I want to welcome you to Trending Now, where we discuss the products your customers, whether retailers or the end consumer, want and need. Today we're chatting with my friend Troy Buechel. He's a horticultural specialist for the Mid-Atlantic U.S. for Premier Tech growers and consumers, makers of ProMix. Welcome, Troy.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
And where are you broadcasting from today?
Well, not a large town, but Quakertown, Pennsylvania, which is about halfway between Philadelphia and Allentown.
The Quaker State, named for its oil. And its Quakers.
It might just be, yes. I'm not actually sure about that.
But from there you cover the Mid-Atlantic U.S.
Yes, I have a piece in New York, Long Island, and I cover the Mid-Atlantic, and I even go as far as Michigan.
Today we're going to talk about two new ProMix products that you have, which are not new, but they're new. And they're both plug and germination mixes. And what's new about them is they both include biofungicides right in the mix, right?
That is correct, yes.
All right, let's dive into that. And to do that, I'm going to share a quick PowerPoint that you shared with me that's got the details. So let's take a look. Fill us in. Tell us about these new mixes.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. Yeah. So again, the mixes I want to be talking about, the mixes themselves are not new, and certainly in our company, biofungicide is not a new concept. But what we're doing is we're putting the biofungicide back into our plug mixes, our two mixes, which are Chromex PGX and FPX, which I'll talk about them a little bit later. So first of all, what is the biofungicide? It's a great question. We get that. First of all, the biofungicide is a natural bacterium. It's called Bacillus pumilus PTB 180. And it's a rapid colonizer, rapidly colonizes roots within 48 hours, as most bacteria tend to do that rapidly. And the biofungicide bacteria produces a polypeptide or an antibiotic, or if you want to think of a natural fungicide, that gives off, again, it is the polypeptide that suppresses root diseases caused by Alternaria, Fusarium, Pythium, and Rhizoctonia. So why do we include the biofungicide in the mixes? Now, it's standard now. So why do we do that? Well, simply ask yourself this question. When are plants most susceptible, whether they're young seedlings or rooted cuttings, when are they most susceptible to root disease? And that's usually when they're young. When plants get older, they tend to be able to be more resilient against root disease issues. So why? Well, first of all, when we're starting seeds, everything's wet and saturated. Same with rooting of cuttings. We're growing in wet environments. The problem with growing in wet environments is you need that to germinate seed and put roots on, but once the seedling's up and the roots are starting to form, that stresses plants out because of the lack of oxygen in the growing media. But couple that with the fact that, guess what? Pythium, Phytophthora, and Phalaenopsis, they love wet growing conditions. So if you need the wet growing conditions for the plant and you got the diseases that love it, it creates a wonderful marriage for disease outbreak, which is not necessarily a good thing.
Sure.
So the advantages of the ProMix of biofungicide. So as I mentioned before, it helps to control root diseases caused by Alternaria, Fusarium, Pythium, and Rhizoctonia. By reducing those root disease problems, you don't necessarily need to drench as often. And one of the questions we get is the upcharge for the biofungicide is actually less than the cost of applying the actual fungicide drench. So that's a good thing. And of course, you get season-long control. Now, of course, plug season isn't very long, but you don't have to reapply the actual biofungicide, and you will actually get some transfer of that bacteria from the plug stage into the transplant up, either going to a 4-inch, a 6-inch, whatever the pot size may be. It may not be quite as thoroughly colonized, but it does provide some control there.
And does that colony continue to grow?
It
Uh,
will grow it, as the roots extend out into the growing media away from the original plug. You probably don't get quite as good of colonization out in the extremities, but near the initial root ball you do. Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah. And a great thing about it is you can put on fungicides on or insecticides, doesn't seem to hurt it. The bacillus is a pretty resilient bacteria. It doesn't die real easily, which is great. So you can pretty much use those things. And also shelf life. We recommend using up ProMix within 9 months because wetting agent will break down. But the biofungicide is pretty hardy. It'll last up to 2 years as long as the storage temperatures are below 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
All right. I was going to ask too, can a grower forego their routine drenches if they're doing, a young plant grower often does regular drenches on certain things. Can they stop if they're using your soil, or should they be careful about that?
Yeah, we generally see about, for most customers, we see about a 50 to 75% reduction in the amount of fungicide drenches. Now, granted, in a plug stage, maybe you're not going to be putting on more than one or two drenches, but you might be able to slough off one of those instead of having them all of them. But yeah, we don't recommend necessarily killing the program, but just simply reducing it.
Sure, great. And you got some examples here to show
Yeah,
us.
yeah, I appreciate that, Chris. So this first one, Pythium, these plants are being challenged by Pythium. They're seed geraniums, and it's obvious from the visual with the biofungicide, we see better growth. And again, the reason why we're getting better growth is because we don't have the the actual fungus itself, the Pythium attacking the root system. So, and another example here is Rhizoctonia in slightly more adult plants. These would be Impatiens. And again, where the biofungicide's present and all of them have been inoculated with Rhizoctonia, see the ones that have been inoculated with the biofungicide and the Rhizoctonia are doing much better than the ones without. So, and looking at this, Rex begonia, rooting and cuttings. Now, of course, the biofungicide doesn't actually help stimulate initial rooting, but once the roots are out, then they become quickly colonized by the biofungicide. And you can see the plants just perform better in the liner stage, just simply because the bacteria is there to help reduce the pathogens. And probably we've seen some evidence that gives off some enzymes that help to break down more complicated or complex organic materials and bring in nutrients as well. So that's why we see some of that growth enhancement.
So these are the actual products.
These are the actual products. So in this particular slide, I'm going to talk about their commonalities, and the next one we'll talk about their differences. So we have two plug germination mixes, our Promix PGX, which is a combination of fine peat and fine vermiculite, and our Promix FPX, which is a combination of fine peat and fine perlite. So similarities, they're both formulated with dolomitic and calcitic limestone, wetting agent, starter fertilizer charge that lasts about till the first true leaf stage. And then, of course, the Bacillus pumilus, PTB 180 to help with root disease. And they can be used for any size cell. Hey, if you want to, 104s, 288s, 512s, whatever, it will work for that. It's virtually stick-free, so you don't have to worry about jamming up your cells in your flats as well, especially when you put them through an automated flatter, you get the brushes that brush it off. Not to worry about the sticks.
All right. And you showed me how to remember the names of them. Pretty easy. PGX means plug and germination.
Right,
And
plug and germination mix.
FPX is fine perlite.
That is correct.
All right. So if you remember those, you remember which one it is you ordered last time.
That's right.
All right.
All right, a little bit more. So now the differences. So why would you use one over the other? Good question. So the PGX, which is the peat vermiculite growing media, that tends to retain a little bit more water. So it's really good if you want an environment, especially if it's hot out and you want to try to keep things wet. Vermiculite also has a higher cation exchange capacity, which means it'll tend to retain nutrients. And also the pullable nature of the plug, when you pull it out with a liner, with a peat vermiculite media, it tends to nest together better, so the root ball doesn't fall apart quite as easily if the root development's not quite there. Whereas with an FPX, you have a little bit more, you have perlite in there, it makes it a little bit more crumbly. But the advantages of now the Promix FPX biofungicide is the perlite helps reduce water retention, also possibly reduces some of the algae growth because you get a little bit faster dry down. It's not as attractive to your shore flies. I think the FPX is a better product for propagation, so a liner media. I think it does well because you get those air spaces around those roots. And should you over fertilize, it's easy to leach compared to the other material.
All right. Now, suppose somebody wanted this for, say, bedding crop in packs or something. Could you use one of these for that, or do you have a mix for that, or does it not make sense?
Yeah, for these, what we're looking at is basically plugged stages. Once you start getting into larger cells, certainly cell packs and up, we would probably recommend something like our Promix PX or our Promix LP15 for those uses.
All right. And did you say that all of your germination mix now includes it? You still have the option of with the biofungicide or without?
Right now, we're making it so that those biofungicides are standard in the products. At this point, we're not planning to make it without, but we may make some exceptions
Okay,
here.
but it does come standard now. So if you're
It comes
buying
standard. Yeah,
a
it's a
mix,
standard.
germination mix, either of these, you are automatically going to be using biofungicide.
That is correct.
Beautiful. Well, bring these growers into the 21st century.
There we go. Yeah, yeah.
They're all in
It's
now.
there to help them. That's why we do it.
All right. Any last words about the new biofungicide pro mixes?
Yeah, well, as I said before, biofungicide's not new to our company. These mixes are not new to our company. And actually, at one time we used to have the biofungicide in there, but we got it. We got it so that it's now a standard product, and we're pretty excited about it. So again, if you're going to have disease and plugs, why not have biofungicide in there to help control it?
All right. Well, I called it trending now, and that's what's trending now. Doing these biological controls in combination with your traditional production techniques. Troy, thanks very much. I greatly appreciate it. On behalf of Troy Buechel, I'm Chris Beytes saying see you next time.
Thanks, Chris.